I helped a hot drunk lady get home and now my mom has made me install a tracker. This happened during a pretty bad snowstorm at about 9:30 at night out in the middle of nowhere. I was 16 at the time, and you'll see why that's relevant soon. I drive a truck with 4x4 and my parents bought me the best winter tires that they could afford, but my mother is still paranoid about me driving whenever it snows. I was driving home from working at a water park. I only worked there 2 or 3 days a week and only for a few hours per shift because of school. It's a water park and a ski resort on top of a pretty decent sized mountain. That whole day we were experiencing a pretty bad snowstorm which made the roads really slick. The plows were doing their best to plow and salt the roads, but the snow was falling much faster than they could move it. It was about 9:30 and I was maybe 3/4 of the way home from my short shift when I saw that someone had gone off the road. Their car was really far down into a ditch. I pulled into a driveway to turn around and rolled down my window and yelled to the person asking if they needed help. The person in the car yelled back, but their car was extremely loud. Something under the car had been torn off because the engine noise was deafening and the driver kept trying to reverse the car. I put on my flashers, rolled up my window, and got out and tried telling the person to stop hitting the gas because the car was so stuck that it wasn't going to move. It almost looked like the Titanic sinking. The rear end was sitting up higher than the front and the wheels were barely touching the ground. The front wheels kept just slinging mud and snow everywhere. The driver clearly either couldn't hear me or wasn't understanding me, so I climbed/slid down into the ditch to get closer so I could hear them. When I got down I realized that the ditch was full of muddy water, so my boots and pants got soaked. I reached into the car and shut the car off. Because it was still so loud that you couldn't hear anything else even if you tried yelling. As soon as I did that I could hear the driver. The driver was a girl who was clearly extremely drunk. She smelled like alcohol and her words were slurred. She kept talking a mile a minute about how I needed to go get change so I could pull her car out so she could get home so she could go to work tomorrow. I was getting kind of overwhelmed because I didn't even know if she was hurt or not, and it's weird to be talking to drunk strangers, so I just interrupted her and asked if she was hurt. She said no and then went back to talking about chains. I told her that I didn't have chains and that even if I did there's no way my tiny truck could pull her car out. The ditch was probably 8 feet deep and her car was at least a foot deep in mud. She would have needed a tractor or a crane or something to get it out, and then once it's out the car looked totaled. I asked her if she had a phone and she said yes and held up a phone with a cracked screen which was soaking wet and not working. I told her that she could use my phone to call someone if we head back to my truck. The door to her car was stuck shut because it was partially buried in mud, so I had to help her crawl out of the window. Then she just crawled up the side of the ditch while I kept trying to say, "Ma'am, your window is still open and your lights are still on." I shut off her lights, but she took her keys with her so I couldn't shut the window. It probably didn't matter because the inside of the car was already disgusting and the car was wrecked anyways. I climbed up out of the ditch after her to find her sitting in my truck. I got in as well. She was sitting on top of all of my stuff including my headphones, which was kind of irritating, but she was drunk so she probably didn't even realize. This girl was really pretty. The kind of girl I'd never be able to talk to if not for an emergency situation happening. So keep that in mind. I gave her my phone to call someone and she tried a few times but no one answered. She said, "Can you just bring me home?" And the way she said it made my face red. So I just immediately said yes without considering what I was getting into. My mother was expecting me home at a certain time and because of the weather she was very strict about me updating her. But this girl had me completely distracted. I completely forgot to tell my mom that I had stopped. I asked the girl where she lived and she said next to some Family Dollar in a town 30 minutes away. I knew where that was so I headed in that direction. Things were really quiet and awkward for a few minutes because I was too flustered to say anything. I'm awful at talking to women. She looked older than me but not so much older that I'd have an easy time talking to her like I am with my mother's friends or my teachers. Then she just started talking about a bunch of random stuff. Like how she had just come from a party and how she was fine to drive, and then about her work and things her friends had said. She kept talking like I knew her for a long time. Making a bunch of references to people I don't know or events I wasn't there for. It was awkward. After a while she kept asking me rapid-fire questions. What's my name? How old am I? What do I do for work? Who I'm friends with? She asked if she could play something on my phone. So she played some music on my phone through the truck speakers. Then I almost went off the road and unalived us both. She had said that her hands were freezing and I said yeah, mine are cold too. But she grabbed my hand and felt it and said they're not that cold, haha, and put my hand on her lap. To this day that's the only time I've ever touched a girl like that, and it scared the crap out of me and distracted me so much that we almost went off the road. She was wearing leggings and she put my hand right on her thigh and then her hands on top of mine. I guess to warm it up. It was really hard to drive while also trying to savor the moment, plus she just kept talking and talking. Also I could feel the blood rushing from my hand to my pee back to my brain. She told me to pull over into some random parking lot, and I didn't know what she wanted, but she immediately unzipped my pants and started giving me head. Needless to say, less than 12 seconds later we were back on the road. She was giggling at me for nutting so quick. It felt like a scene from a movie. But this isn't a movie, so we eventually got to the Family Dollar she had talked about and she just got out of my truck, said, "Thanks," and then walked off towards her house. I thought about asking for her number, but not only did I completely chicken out, but she was older than me and definitely wouldn't be interested. On my way back home I kept thinking about what had happened and how no one was going to believe me, but mostly about how soft and warm she was and how even though I thought she was annoying at first, her voice became angelic after she put my hand on her lap and her mouth on my pee. But then I got pulled over. The cop came up to me and asked if my name was my name. Then he basically started yelling at me saying that my mother has been calling them over and over again, making them go out in this snowstorm looking for me, and that she thought I had crashed. He said that they were already extremely busy because there were people actually going off the road and that I was taking them away from real emergencies. He escorted me the rest of the way home and I had to explain to him and my mother what took me so long. My mother didn't believe me and still doesn't believe me, and I got in a huge amount of trouble and ended up having to quit at my job at the water park to get something closer to home. I was grounded for weeks and now I have to have Life 360 on my phone.